Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this online hearing of the Committee of Adjustment of the City of Ottawa under the Planning Act. This video conference is also live streaming on YouTube. With me are my fellow panel members, Jocelyn Chandler, Stephen Lewis, and Terrence Otto. Martin Vervoort regretfully sends his regrets and he won't be joining us today. My name is Fabien Poulin. I will be chairing this hearing. Procedure for this hearing will be as follows. Listed on the agenda and appearing on the screen are the applications we will hear today. For the sake of efficiency, the committee may deal with agenda items in different order. Committee members have reviewed the planning reports and any written submissions in support or in opposition to each of the applications. Today, we'll hear oral submissions from any interested parties. Notice regarding minor variance applications, notwithstanding pre-consultation with city staff, is the responsibility of the applicant to identify all required variances accurately on the application to one, add a new variance or increase the extent of variances requested. These must be given in accordance with the Planning Act and may require the application to be recirculated for the next hearing date at a cost to the applicant at the prescribed fee. If an applicant amends their plans with no impact to the variances or to reduce the variances requested, recirculation may not be required. As part of the statutory public notification requirements, each applicant was required to post the sign on the property and file a statutory declaration confirming the sign posting. This declaration must be on file today before we can hear the application. Without it, I may have to adjourn the application or administer an oath if necessary. Can the coordinator confirm that we have received all statutory declarations?
Mr. Chair, we have received a statutory declaration for item number 9, 2170 Ottawa Road 29. All other items will need the oath read today.
Thank you very much. The committee may ask for a brief presentation of the application followed by questions from members and submissions from the public. Please address your comments to the chair, starting with your name and spelling it if necessary, and your municipal address for the record. The committee limits presentations to 5 minutes. Any exceptions will be at the discretion of the chair. And before we begin, we have 2 items of business to address. Does any member present need to declare an interest in any of the applications that are before us today, or that may be on the agenda of another committee panel? Yes, Mr. Lewis, you're muted.
Yeah, I'll declare conflict in item 6 and number 7. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We also have to adopt the minutes of the January 12th, 2022 hearing. All those in favor of adopting the minutes of the January 12th, 2022 hearing, please raise your hands. Minutes are adopted. Thank you. And we will now hear the application scheduled for this hearing and dealing first with items that may be adjourned. Is there anyone present who wishes to address or request an adjournment of one of the applications scheduled for the hearing? I believe we have 3, possibly 4. First of all, I believe item number 2 having to do with 3016 Upper Dwyer Hill Road. And Mr. Scott Murray, are you available, sir?
Mr. Chair, we do not seem to have Mr. Murray on the call. I'll have to reach out to him.
Okay, well, that's fine. He has, I believe, agreed to the adjournment today. We'll wait till you get a chance to get a hold of him, but we'll come back to him once you do. Thanks. And item 6, and this I believe is Mr. Price, having to do with 8921 Mallock Lane.
There we go.
Good morning, Mr. Price.
Chair, members of the committee. Rod Price on behalf of the
8921 Mallock Lane. I believe you're in agreement with having this application adjourned until March the 2nd. Is that correct?
I know that's what staff would prefer. There was some discussion in terms of the EIS that was submitted, that they didn't have enough time to review it. So if that's the case, we can support a 2-week adjournment.
Okay, that's great. So I'd like to ask the panel then to approve this adjournment of this application until March the 2nd. All in favor, please raise your hands. Can't see you, Mr. Lewis. Well, there you are. Can you read? If I can't hear you because you're muted.
This is one of the ones I declared an interest in.
It's just a procedural matter, so we'll move on. You'll just abstain, I guess, from this one.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So this application is adjourned to March the 2nd. Thank you, Mr. Price. And I believe you're on the next one too.
Okay.
And I believe you're in agreement with adjourning this application for 8725 Clinton Road.
For McClinton.
Yes.
Yes, we are in agreement in adjourning the parcel in question, which would be the woodlot parcel, part 1. I can't remember, I don't have the file number in front of me. We agree with staff's report, though, that we would like to proceed with the single variance request for the easterly lot.
So you would like to proceed with B0015. B0014 will be adjourned to March the 2nd. Is that right? Or sine die, excuse me.
Sine die for that one, yeah. There's been, we're trying to determine whether or not that we can fit into the May 2003 date to allow 2 severances. So at this point, we'll park that one and move forward with what I'll suggest is the easier one.
Mr. Harrigan, do you have some comments?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, the department requests that B ending in 15 be adjourned. B00014 is the application that we can support at this time, as it's entirely outside of the natural features. And that would be part 1 on the sketch that Mr. Price has provided.
So B0015 is the one we're adjourning, is that correct?
That is the adjournment sine die request. That is correct.
Okay, perfect. And you agree with that, Mr. Price?
Yes, we do, Mr. Chair.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. I'd like to ask the panel to approve B0015 to be adjourned. All those in favor? Yes, Ms. Chandler?
Could we again clarify which application is with each address, because there is definitely there's a conflict between 2 of the documents we have in front of us. There are 2 addresses, 8685 and 8721. Which one do you want is planning requesting that we adjourn?
Mr. Harrigan?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, the planning would, it is part 2 on the sketch shown, which would be address 8721, which is the identified address. This is the lot that is entirely within the natural features.
Okay.
And is the smaller of the 2 lots.
Okay, so we are adjourning 8721 to March the 2nd, or sorry, sine die. All those in favor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Your application has been adjourned. And we'll move the other application to the very end of the meeting so we can excuse Mr. Lewis. He has a conflict.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Now, Mr. Price, could you just come back for one more second when we were reviewing, if you're around? Sorry. Sorry about that. When we were reviewing.
Sorry, I was just plugging in.
Okay.
Excuse me.
When we were reviewing application number 5, we noticed that there's several items that still need to be provided for planning The suggestion may be that we adjourn this application as well to give you enough time to provide the information to planning. Would you be willing to adjourn this application?
I'd be willing to, but I mean, my preference would be that we move it forward. I know staff has identified potential MDS calculations, but they've also supported the application. So
It's your call.
I will leave that. Geez, I wasn't really expecting that. Given the staff report, I was hopeful that it would go pretty smoothly. I know they identified some MDS, but we know there's not any issues. So if it's easier for everybody, then yeah, we can.
Ms. Chandler has a comment she'd like to make in advance. Go ahead.
Sure.
Ms. Chandler.
Could we hear from planning on the non-complying comments? Because I don't think it's so much the MDS that concerns us. It's perhaps the need for minor variance, or we were surprised that there wasn't a request for adjournment on this from planning.
Mr. Gordon?
Yes, just to clarify, this is 1534 Dwyer Hill that we're discussing.
Correct.
Thank you. I don't have the agenda in front of me. So yes, our adjournment request, or sorry, we didn't request an adjournment, but it's recommended as the non-complying issue is to do with the existing lot that is benefiting from a lot line adjustment. And there's two areas in which that lot is non-complying right now. It's 5 meters short of the required lot width, and it's also under 0.8 hectares. So through this application, there's the two severances on either side of the existing lot, which will make it impossible to add lot width to that lot in the future. So it's staff's opinion that given that there's two severances going on and a lot line adjustment, now would be a good opportunity to increase the width of that lot and bring it into compliance to eliminate the need for future minor variances. The other concern, and this one is more pressing, is that the existing lot is undersized for the current servicing requirements. And there is, through the lot line adjustment, a plan to add some land to it, but it only brings the lot up to about 0.5 of a hectare, whereas the 0.8 is required. And by adding to the land, that lot loses its non-complying rights. So the concern is that that lot would not be compliant with the bylaw.
So normally we would expect to see accompanying variance applications if we were creating or addressing non-complying lots. No?
Gordon?
I would expect one for the lot area, given that that one loses its non-compliance. In the case of the lot width, that is not being altered. So it's staff's opinion that a variance wouldn't be required for that. We've just noted that it's a good opportunity to resolve that in case future redevelopment is to take place.
Yes, Mr. Price.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I respectfully disagree with staff's point. We are just adding a portion of land to illegal non-conforming property. We're making a situation better. We are not looking to increase the width. Redevelopment of this property would be extremely difficult down the road. It has some heritage elements to it. So I think if anybody were to come forward to redevelop that site, you would be into a number of different applications with the city. So during the pre-application process, we thought just by adding a piece to the context of it is, it's The owners are trying to clean up the estate of the mother. They cleaned it up. So the one son lives in the house that we're severing, creating the other lot. And then we're trying to clean up the ownership of the existing heritage house to incorporate all the little out sheds and garages to go with it. That's the intent. It's just to clean up an existing situation so the family can move on. So in terms of minor variances and what have you, I don't believe they're required. I think we have every right to just add a piece of land to an existing legal non-conforming property and move on.
So would you like to hear
We're making
this?
an existing situation better.
Okay. Would you like to have this application heard today? Oh, we've got two more. Ms. Chandler, do you want to finish your thought?
Well, what I would suggest is, what I'm thinking is we can probably hear it, and if we decide through the presentation that it should be adjourned to add the minor variance, and we can always do that midstream.
Okay, Mr. Lewis?
I see on the application, Mr. Chandler's already said that MDS is maybe a minor thing. I feel the same way about the MDS part 2, but I see 10 conditions on this application. That's a lot of conditions to fill. By adjourning it 2 weeks, will some of those or a few of those conditions disappear, which would certainly be in the interest, I believe, of the applicant? Conditions sometimes can turn into nightmares. That's a question for, I guess, Mr. Price and Mr. Gordon. Probably more Mr. Gordon.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I think procedurally we're into more than a 2-week adjournment. If we go that route, I would suspect that if we are revising plans to resubmit, now we're into a recirculation fee. Our clients are rural landowners. They're not developers per se. They're just trying to clean up an estate of property, family property. So, I'll defer that to staff and what they think. But I could go back to the client and amend the sketches to make them comply. It was never anything that came up through the pre-application process. But if whether maybe it's committee staff can confirm that a recirculation wouldn't be required, I could potentially have updated sketches into committee and staff, by tomorrow.
Mr. Gordon?
I guess first to member Lewis's point, most of these conditions will likely remain. I think we can probably resolve MDS within 2 weeks. I'm just trying to see what else might be able to be resolved in that period. To the applicant's question of timelines, if the committee agrees that recirculation is not required, then and we receive the revised sketches, in next week, then planning's of the opinion that it could be heard again in 2 weeks with the revised lot lines.
Yes, Mr. Lewis, you're muted. Yes.
Back to the recirculation seems to be a big issue here. I don't know if the recirculation needs to be, is my thought, because these buildings and a site are fairly isolated. There are no neighbors in the near vicinity, and the landowner's property is large enough that it's quite a piece away from neighbors' lot lines. There's no houses, I believe, across the road or anywhere near the lot. So I believe a recirculation probably isn't really needed on this one. That's all for now.
Okay. So, Mr. Price, have you heard all those items? Would you like to adjourn, or would you like to have the application heard today?
Well, I would like to have that battle of staff, but I think I'll just step back and we will amend these sketches and we'll adjourn it for the 2 weeks.
Okay. So the next available meeting will be March the 2nd. All those in favor of having this application adjourned to March the 2nd, please raise your hands. Your application is adjourned to March the 2nd. Thank you very much, Mr. Price.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate your patience, everyone.
Okay, so now we will hear the applications in order, beginning
Mr.
with
Chair, if we want to jump back to
item
Mr.
2.
Scott Murray's application, item
Yes,
2, I'll add him in now.
thank you. You're muted, Mr. Murray.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I am fine, thanks. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. I tried to get through earlier, but for whatever reason, I couldn't unmute this phone. And
Not a worry, it's fine. We're dealing with your application. Your application is having to do with 3016 Upper Dwyer Hill Road. There's a request for an adjournment of this application. Are you in agreement with that adjournment request?
well, I'm not the applicant. I'm the applicant's agent, and yes, the applicant is agreeable to that adjournment. And I'm not sure what the time frame would be.
We have a suggested date of March the 2nd. Would that work for you?
I'm certainly available on that date. I'm just wondering, though, if that's going to be enough time. That's only 2 weeks. What is the meeting following that one? Your meeting following that one?
That would be the 18th, March the 18th. Sorry, March the 16th.
Maybe that would be a better one to aim for.
Okay. So if the panel would like to adjourn this application until March the 16th, please raise your hands. This application has been adjourned until March the 16th. Thank you very much, Mr. Murray.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
Goodbye.
So, goodbye. Now we'll move on to application number 1. Application number 1 is having to do with 6981 Fennel Lane. Ms. Blakely, are you available? Good morning.
Mr. Chair.
I need to administer an oath concerning the sign application on the property. Can you take that oath today?
Yes, I will, Mr. Chair.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly legible and visible during that time? Do you swear?
I swear.
Thank you very much. Can you give us a brief description of your application today? And keep in mind that it's a 5-minute time limit.
Yes, of course. We have prepared some presentation materials which you can bring up. So I'll keep it brief this morning, but for the committee's record, my name is Kayla Blakely. I'm a planner with Novatech. So we're representing the owners to seek a minor variance on their behalf to permit the reconstruction of an existing dwelling at their property. If we flip to the next slide, it will just show a general location of the property. It's within an area of rural residential development along the west side of the Rideau River, just south of the village of Cars. The property has access from Fennel Lane, which is a private lane, to Rideau Valley Drive. If we continue to the next, I believe we have some just kind of street view photos for context. So the property is quite large in area, and it extends back to the Rideau River about 74 meters in depth. So the front portion, as you can see, is developed with existing one-story detached dwelling, as well as 2 large detached garages and a shed, along with a gravel parking area. So of note is much of the property is within the 1 to 100 year flood elevation of the river. If we continue to the next slide. So this demonstrates the proposal. So the current owners acquired this property in spring of 2021. So it was their desire to reconstruct the existing older dwelling that occupies the property. So this would involve demolishing the existing dwelling and its accessory buildings. So in terms of a bit of background, so the owners would of course have ability to reconstruct the existing dwelling in its current location, as well as enlarge it up to 20%. And this would be in accordance with the city and the RBCA's regulations for development within the floodplain. But as shown on this plan, this wasn't desired given the current location and configuration of the existing uses on the property. If we flip to the next, yeah, that's good, thanks. So what they're proposing is to reconstruct a new one-story single detached dwelling with a 2-car detached garage. So the dwelling, as you can see, will be designed with a crawl space as well as a finished floor elevation above the 1 to 100 year, and that's in accordance with the RBCA regulations. If we flip to the next. So the purpose of the application is to seek a variance to permit development within the floodplain, and this is to recognize the slightly alternate location of the new dwelling on the lot. You can see that the new dwelling will be more or less in the same location, excuse me, where the front of the dwelling is about 15 centimeters below the flood elevation at that location. If we continue, I can speak briefly to the 4 tests. So in terms of the official plan, whether evaluating under the current or the new official plan, the proposed reconstruction of the residential use does conform to the corresponding rural designations. As per the plans, the reconstructed dwelling will continue to be well outside of the prescribed 30-meter setback from the river. Of interest in terms of the official plan policies is that they do contemplate the removal and replacement of existing dwellings where they're located within the floodplain. This is to be done in accordance with certain criteria, specifically that the gross floor area is generally in accordance with that exists, that it's not introducing any more flood risk or potential flooding for the area, and is done with the approval of the Conservation Authority, which we have consulted with prior to these applications, and understand that the Conservation Authority is satisfied with the design in terms of their regulations. If we flip to the next slide, just provides a zoning map. So the reconstructed dwelling is a permitted use in the underlying rural residential zone. So it will be in keeping with the intent of that zone to maintain residential character in the rural context. The property is, as you can see, for the most part subject to the floodplain overlay, so that this application will not increase gross floor area beyond that would be permitted under section 58 of the zoning bylaw, which regulates development, so that those provisions of the zoning bylaw would allow for the 20% increase in gross floor area to an existing dwelling. So the reconstructed dwelling, it will be situated such that it aligns more closely with the abutting uses. It will also rectify some of the existing non-complying conditions of the property in terms of the location and the size of the existing dwelling and its accessory buildings. And this will be done in a manner that does not introduce any additional flood risk in accordance with the floodplain overlay provisions. If we flip to the next slide. This was the intent to show the current dwelling and garage's very close proximity to its neighbor to the north, so that this application will allow for the dwelling to shift away from the north lot line to a setback of 3 meters. So it will just improve on that existing condition while remaining more or less in the same footprint as exists today.
5 minutes, Ms. Blakely, please. You've got a couple of minutes.
Okay. I think to wrap up, if we flip to the next. So to conclude, the application will allow for a building orientation and spacing and configuration that is very much more in keeping with its neighbor and the intent of the zone. And of course, it will just allow for a more logical placement of buildings that would then what would have been permitted or what would have been expected if the owners were to just reconstruct and enlarge the dwelling in its current location.
Thank you, Ms. Blakely. Are you familiar with the one condition that that planning is looking for should this application be approved?
Yes, Mr. Chair, there's no concern with planning's request for tying the approval to the plans on file.
Great. Mr. Gordon, can you make some comments on behalf of the city, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. As noted in planning's report, we do have some concerns just with the plans provided. We don't have concerns with what was just described, which is moving a dwelling that is within the permitted increased size on the site. It generally conforms. Our concerns are to do with just the provided elevations are somewhat indicative that there may be contemplation of adding a second floor at a future date. And as noted in our report, part of that is the combination of the ceiling height leaves room for 2 stories. But further to that, there's, if you look at the front elevation of the proposed dwelling, that's on page 4 of planning's report, you can see that the windows don't really, on the second floor, don't really line up with the uses on the first floor, which suggests that there is contemplation of additional living space above in the future. Planning notes that that would require an additional minor variance to add more floor area, as well as building permits, and is unlikely to receive support because it would significantly increase the potential number of people that could be within the floodplain as compared to the existing dwelling.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Gordon. I'd like to ask our conservation partners for their comments, please.
Hi, through the chair, the RBCA has reviewed the application. We have no objections to the application as it's presented. I'd echo the comments of the city regarding the second story, but it's been advised that that's not the case, and that's not what we're presented. So that question has been discussed as part of the review of this application. We are again, no objections to the application as it's presented. The project would require a permit through the Conservation Authority, which we would undertake separate of obviously the Committee of Adjustments process. But based on the plans, the size and scale of the building would meet our policies, and there'd be no concerns as it relates to any review or modifications to that review changing the size or location of the structure. So I'll leave it at that. There are no concerns from our end.
Thank you, Mr. Lalonde. Now I'd like to ask the panel for their comments. Ms. Chandler?
There is 6 feet of space underneath the garage, and I don't see cross sections for the space underneath the house. I guess I'm worrying about this gross floor area question. and the windows showing underneath the house, if that's 6 feet, I mean, how far, and this is both to planning and the CA planners, what are the tools that you'll be looking for in order to ensure this is one floor of living space, both beneath the main floor and above it?
Mr. Gordon? Sorry.
I was going to say, if I may, through the chair, for the Conservation Authority, in terms of permits, that would factor into our review. That was noted as part of the review for this application, the height of the basements, and that would need to be corrected. But that wouldn't change the size and scale of the house as it relates to the variance proposed. Ultimately, I guess to cut it short, I'd be asking for it to be converted to a crawl space, which is 5'11", not the 6 feet as presented in the plans.
So I'm bringing this up because planning is asking that we tie this to the site plans, which show some of that information. So then the applicant is sort of caught with a variance. I guess we could, so I think we have to consider, if we tie this to the site plan, include in that condition that the crawl space would be reduced in height to meet the Conservation Authority's requirements. And what about the space under the garage, which is also shown with stairs down to it and at 6 feet?
Way through the chair, that the same would apply to the garage.
Okay, and the second floor of the house, there is truss work design shown for the garage. There is not an indication in the house on how that, what has adequate height for a full second floor. And certainly I agree with planning, the window pattern doesn't make a lot of sense to me for a double height ceiling. Maybe the applicant can explain what the architect is proposing here by building that. Like, that's a lot of even expensive building materials to build that much second floor onto a house that won't have living space. So maybe the agent can speak to that.
Ms. Blakely.
Yeah, certainly. Through you, Mr. Chair. So the design was to create a more spacious, airy dwelling that would take full advantage of light and views of the river. The owners themselves are retired individuals. They have no intention in constructing a second story. The design, I think, in the long term, it was to allow for potential second story if it were the case that the flood elevation continued to decrease, which in our experience has been the case along this portion of the river. So if at some point in the future the floodplain changed in this area, there would be opportunity for a future owner to seek the permits for a second story. But at this point, it's understood that there would be no support from planning or the RVCA with that. And I think that's why the owners are fully agreeable to tying or conditioning the approval on a single story, because that's their intent.
Mr. Gordon, do you have any comments on that?
I'm not aware of the floodplain reducing. I mean, I would, our conservation partners are more versed in the floodplain than I can comment on, but just generally with climate change, my intuition would say that the floodplains are going higher, not lower. So I would say it's a long shot to, it's a lot of money to spend to in the hopes that one day they can support a minor variance, but that's the applicant's decision and the owner's decision. I do agree with what Member Chandler brought up about the basement. It was our understanding that it was proposed as a crawl space. If it were above a crawl space, that would be caught at building code time, but given the indication from the Conservation Authority, it sounds like that should be reduced to 511 in advance of that in order to get a permit. So it does appear that the condition included in planning's report would need to indicate basically a modified plans that show a crawl space, not a basement. So perhaps that could be written in to be acceptable to with our standard wording to the development the manager of development review.
Okay. Any comments, Mr. Lalonde?
If I may, through the chair, just for the committee's information, the reference to the reduction in floodplain is accurate. In 2017, there was an update to the floodplain in this section based on additional information collected over a long-term long-term analysis of additional data. The Rideau River did drop about a foot. But it is not the expectation, A, that we are going to be revisiting those numbers anytime soon, and B, that those numbers would continue to drop. It was more of a correction of information. And as our colleague of the city had indicated, that's their experience is usually going up. And from our experience, it's a little harder than that, depending on the system, what's being evaluated. But it is not expected that another drop like we saw in 2017 would be expected. Not only in the short term, but even in the long term.
Ms. Chandler, does that answer your question, or would you like to continue?
Yeah, okay. So I only have one other quick question. Is Funnel Lane a public road? That'd be
Mr. Gordon?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't know the specifics of Fennel Lane. In my review of the address, it did appear to show up as a road on Geo Ottawa, but that is not always entirely accurate.
I'm asking because it used to not be a public road, so I don't know if that's changed, and that would require another variance. But if it hasn't been flagged, then I will presume it'll get caught at zoning review if it's still an issue. Oh, wait, we have some additional support.
Okay, Mr. Mignon, you've been patient. I've seen your hand up there, but we wanted to continue with answering the questions that Ms. Chandler had. Do you have something to add, sir?
Yeah, I'd just like to add that Fennel Lane is a private lane.
So, Mr. Gordon, the planning. My understanding is that you need a minor variance to build on a private lane, to get a building permit on a private lane.
I did just receive indication as well that it is a private lane. I believe they may need a minor variance.
So maybe, and I don't know what the rules are about reconstruction, maybe Mr. Mignon does, but we might want to just set this down and find out if that's a minor variance that's required, because it would be a shame to have the applicant have to come back again for yet another minor variance rather than to revise this one.
Ms. Blakely, what do you think? Do you want to adjourn this for a couple of weeks till you are able to get that minor variance?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it was our understanding that as an existing use, the reconstruction of an existing use wouldn't trigger the need for a minor variance. I
If I
think
could.
I might
Mr. Mignon?
defer to my colleague Greg on this matter.
So in our view, the existing building is in fact a legal non-conforming use. And as a legal non-conforming use, nobody would dispute the fact that they have the right to repair, restore, reconstruct the existing building in its current location, and including a 20% addition pursuant to the policies. All this application is really doing is sliding the building over so that its location is better in terms of compatibility with neighbors. So it's on the same angle. And it's now got a complying side yard if it were a conforming use. So I don't believe the lane status matters because they have the right to reconstruct in any event. The only reason we're at the committee is because we're sliding the building over into a better location.
Mr. Gordon, do you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I confirmed with the planner, the P3 in the group, Cheryl McWilliams, who signs off on my reports. And given that the request was for reconstruction and that it's legal non-conforming now, we were of the opinion that it should be covered for the rebuilding on a private lane.
Good. Okay. Ms. Chandler, thumbs up?
I'm good.
Good. Okay. Mr. Lewis, do you have any questions or comments?
No problem with the application as what's presented. I can't comment on what might or might not happen in the future. I'm good with it.
Thank you. Mr. Otto?
Yes, I'm more or less good with it. I thought it looked like it would be a good idea to defer for 2 weeks to get these things straightened out. I do have some concerns about why they would want a crawl space in a floodplain area, because all it's going to do is fill with water if it does happen to rise a little bit. But other than that, I'm good to go. If the applicant's confident that they can build and not be flooded out, then I'm okay with it.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Blakely, are you okay to amend the condition to have the crawl space for the garage and for the home to be 5'11", not the 6 feet as is on the plans today? So we'll amend the condition to reflect that.
Yes, Mr. Chair. That was the intent, is to design in accordance with their policies. I think since we hadn't initiated the development permit process, that wasn't flagged, but that's certainly agreeable.
Okay, great. So to that end, I'd like to ask the panel if they would approve this application with that one condition and that change to a crawl space and 5'11". All those in favor, please raise your hands. Your application is approved. Ms. Blakely, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Mignon, for your input.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so now we'll move on to application number 3. Application number 3 is dealing with 4416 Stonecrest Road. Mr. Gillespie, are you available? I see you there. There you are. You're muted, sir. Oh. Looks like the video is not working, but you're still muted, sir. Oh, there you are.
Am I? I can't.
Yeah.
I can't see myself. As long as you can hear me, Mr. Chair.
I can hear you. I need to administer an oath concerning the sign posting for your property.
Yeah.
You take that oath today?
Yep.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time. Do you swear?
Yeah, I do.
I think, Mr. Gillespie, we don't have any concerns voiced by planning or from the Conservation Authority. So to that end, we understand what the application is about, and I'd like to ask the panel for approval of this application since there are no concerns by the parties All those in favor of approval of this application, please raise your hands. Your application is approved, Mr. Gillespie. Thank you very much.
Thank you kindly.
Now we'll move on to application number 4, having to do with 8504 Purdy Road. Ms. Zander, are you available? You are still muted. There you are. Good morning.
Slowly getting there. Good morning, Mr. Chair, committee members.
I need to administer an oath concerning the signposting. Are you able to take that oath today?
I am not, but my client, Julie Kavanaugh, should be on the call and she should be able to take the oath.
I see your name there, Ms. Kavanaugh. There you are. Good morning.
Good morning.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time? Do you swear?
Yes, I swear.
Thank you very much. Ms. Zander, it seems there are not many, there are no concerns voiced by Planning or Conservation Authority. So, but there are some items that we need to address, at least administratively, concerning sizes of the different files. So on file B00534, the frontage has changed from 105 meters down to 95 meters. The area has changed from 9,703 square meters to 8,775 square meters. Do you confirm that that's correct?
Yes,
Okay.
that's correct, sir.
And B00535, the frontage has changed from 100 meters to 90 meters. And the area has changed from 9,379 square meters to 8,383 square meters. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Originally, the two lots were right in the northeast corner. Staff asked us to offset from the corner a bit, and so that resulted in the adjustment in the lot frontages and areas.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So since we don't have any concerns from Planning or Conservation Authority, before I move on to that, Ms. Zander, do you agree with the conditions required for this application? There are 8 of them.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we've reviewed the conditions and have no concerns. Thank you.
Great. So I'd like to ask Planning for approval of this application with the 8 conditions. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Your application is approved, Ms. Zander. Thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay. We are now moving on to application number 8, I believe. Is that correct? Correct, Madam Coordinator?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. This application having to do with 3896 8th Line Road. Mr. Shipman, are you available? Good morning.
Morning, Mr. Chair.
I would like to administer an oath concerning the sign posting for this property. Can you take that oath today?
I can.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time? Do you swear?
I do.
Great. Could you provide a brief description of your application today, and keeping in mind that we have a 5-minute time limit?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a surplus farm dwelling severance application. We're applying to sever the dwelling and associated accessory buildings from a large farm parcel, leaving a large block of arable land or crop land of about 76 hectares in size. So other than that, it's fairly standard, in my view, fairly standard surplus farm dwelling severance. Planning has raised concerns or initially raised concerns with respect to the lot size. We have reduced the lot size to eliminate some of the land in behind the existing barn where there is a manure pit, that type of thing. So we reduced the size, submitted a revised sketch last week. Hopefully the committee has that. We've subtracted about 1.2 hectares, which has taken the severed lot, in this case, down to 2 hectares. So we don't feel that that would have much effect anyways on preserving arable land in behind, but nonetheless, in the interest of moving forward, we have reduced it. We've also agreed to fill in the manure pit that's there. The existing barn has been decommissioned. We provided pictures showing the filling of the gutters and the removal of stalls, that type of thing. So that large former dairy barn has been entirely decommissioned as a livestock facility and will be used in the future for storage purposes. So planning still raised other concerns in respect to aggregate area of the accessory buildings. As you're no doubt aware, typically in the agricultural zone, the aggregate area of the accessory buildings under the AG zoning is 5% of the lot area. We're significantly in excess of that, which is not unusual for surplus farm dwelling severances, where we move to encompass the accessory buildings, barns, that type of thing, keep them on the severed lot rather than the retained farmland. There was a suggestion that the barn be torn down. That's not tenable. The barn is a very valuable building, maybe worth more than the house in terms of what it costs to build it. Again, it's no longer a livestock facility, and I hope the committee has pictures to demonstrate that. So that option is not feasible, and it's indeed anything requiring the removal of barn, I think, would be unprecedented in the annals of surplus farm dwelling severances. Leaving the barn on the retained farmland is not desirable, both from the applicant's position and I think from a general planning view. Having an accessory building on the farm located in fairly close proximity to a residential dwelling would not be desirable. So we've, as amended, we propose this surplus farm dwelling lot on sort of the minimum lot size that we can to preserve agricultural land, and provided the best, I think, separation between the agricultural use in behind and the lot itself. So we'd ask that the committee approve based on our revised sketch.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask planning, Mr. Gordon, if you have any questions, comments.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So we did receive the revised sketch late last week. Planning's report had already been submitted at that time. I would note no pre-consultation with staff was undertaken on this file. So first time we saw it was when it arrived, and I did reach out to express our concerns. The revised sketch doesn't alleviate the fundamental concern here, which is the size of the structure that's being included with the house. It's really key to consider the overall scale, not just the percentage. What we're dealing with here is a large late 20th century barn, not an old, an older, smaller structure that happens to be over the 5% because we're on a 0.4 hectare lot. We're on a 2 hectare lot here. It's a very large former dairy barn. We did receive images to show that it has been decommissioned, but it's above what planning believes could be allowed for a home-based business, and the lot would not be in zoning compliance. So we don't know how it can be rezoned to be consistent with the official plan and the provincial policy statement. So it's our recommendation that we adjourn for some time and have an opportunity to work with the applicant to determine a way forward. Would be preferable that the barn stay with the agricultural parcel or be removed, but we can discuss other options with some time.
Okay. Any comments, Mr. Shipman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As noted, I discussed the two options. One, removing the barn. It's not tenable. I mean, it's way too valuable a structure to remove. We have decommissioned it. Picking up the accessory building, aggregate area of accessory buildings in the zoning is something we've commonly done with surplus farm dwelling severances over the years. It's a common thing. I don't think it matters that the barn is a 20th century structure, or if it's an 18th century structure. It's still way too valuable to tear down. It has all kinds of other uses. Should the owner of this lot in the future wish to apply for to allow some other type of use for that building, commercial storage, that type of thing, well, that would be up to planning and to the applicant in the future. I pointed that we have that similar circumstances all over the countryside. The option of tearing down this building, again, the applicant it's not going to happen. And we believe that keeping it with the severed lot is much preferable to leaving it on the farm parcel in between for future use of both parcels. It would reduce the potential for conflicts, that type of thing. It's much better suited with the property, with the severed lot. Again, as I say, we picked up the excess aggregate area in the necessary rezoning for the retained parcel numerous times in the past. I don't see why that can't be done in this case. This is not that much different from many applications that we've had in the past. It doesn't matter what the age of the building is, it matters its quality, and the applicant is not going to tear it down.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gordon, your hand's up.
Yes, I would, through you, Mr. Chair, I'd like to clarify. I'm not here to argue architectural merits of barns. My point is the scale of the structure is not in keeping with what can be considered accessory to a residence. This is more akin to an industrial size building. If it were to be built for a non-agricultural use, it would require site plan approval because of the size. So it's not something that planning can support as an accessory use to a house. It's far larger than what is permitted for a home-based business. The City of Ottawa takes a systems approach to the agricultural resource area. So even if this, there's very limited options for rezoning because we recognize that permitting uses such as storage or industrial uses in the agricultural area, even if it's on land that is not viable for agriculture, it still has detrimental effects to the surrounding viable agricultural parcels.
Mr. Shipman.
Thank you. Sorry, I wasn't fulsome in my last comments. Just 2 points. I would point out, Mr. Chair, that as a result of approval, nothing changes. We still have a barn and a house. When we're done, we'll have a barn and a house, unless, of course, the barn is torn down. I'd also point out that as a result of conditions of approval, although that we would be undertaking the rezoning to account for the excess area for accessory buildings, it would still be zoned agricultural. It would still have an agricultural designation. And in fact, an agricultural use would be permitted on any lot 0.8 hectares or larger. So indeed, the barn can be viewed as accessory to an agricultural use as well as accessory to a residential use. We have a unique situation here. Well, it's insofar as planning views it, that the scale of the barn is much bigger than normal. Well, I've seen numerous surplus farm dwelling severances where they want to keep it on 0.8 hectares. I mean, if you were to compare the size of the barns and all the accessory buildings, you're right in the same boat. So the scale of the one building is a concern to planning, but as I say, it's been decommissioned. Any non-conforming use in the future would have to be dealt with by way of minor variance, site plan control, that type of thing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Lewis, I'd like to ask you if you have any comments.
These severances and surplus farm dwellings happen all the time. Just so happens this seems to be a messy one. The barn, I'm not thinking. As a surplus farm dwelling that's going to be a residential area, my concern or my thoughts are the manure pit. That's something that's not needed for a resident. What's the state of the manure pit right now? Is it covered in and gone?
It remains open. We've agreed to fill it as a condition of approval. Indeed, I think the draft conditions mention that.
Okay, and then what about the crop bunker beside? I'm not real familiar. Is that a cement foundation bunker? Or is that an easy one too?
It's a cement foundation bunker. The applicant wishes to retain that on the retained farmland. It doesn't have a roof or anything, so it's not a building. It's just a corn bunker.
It's going to stay. Is it going to go with the house or stay on the land?
Well, we had initially proposed to put it with the house to take the severance right back to that drain, because the area behind the barn, between the barn and the drain, is practically unusable. But in response to planning's concerns, we've left that with the farm. But yeah, we propose to leave the corn bunker in place.
See, I have a bigger problem actually with the house than I do the barn. It causes quite a few problems. But I don't know, to adjourn this to make some common ground. Are we going to make any, or are we going to come back in a couple of weeks or a month with the same problem? I guess that can it be fixed? I guess that quick response from both applicants, or the applicant and the planning department, would be useful in that. Are we just going to go around in circles, or do we need to make a decision?
Mr. Shipman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The applicant is certainly not going to agree to tearing down the barn, and I don't think leaving the barn on the retained farmland is tenable either. So the applicant's view is to proceed to a decision on the merits of the application.
What about the house?
The house, there is an encroachment, an existing encroachment onto the road. One of the proposed conditions that planning has proposed as conditions of approval is that an encroachment agreement be recognized for that, and we have prepared the necessary parts on a reference plan, that type of thing, to deal with any encroachments onto the road allowance and into the proposed widening. Okay,
Mr. Gordon, can this be fixed any better than it is, or are we at a standstill?
Through the chair, I mean, planning is open to conversation. I would just note that the lot has to be made zoning compliant, and ultimately there is a risk currently that if the zoning can't be made compliant and it's approved today, then there's a risk that this consent would actually lapse because of that, because of the requirement to rezone both the parcels.
If I might quickly add to that, I probably looking at the map that shows the manure pit and the crop bunker on the Severance, and I see the one I have here is 220 by 148, I believe. is that what it's going, what will it be? If it's at the 3.2 hectares, what will it be if the manure storage is and the crop bunker are with the retained land?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It would be down to 2 hectares. We've pulled in our revised sketch, pulled the rear of the lot towards the 8th line to a depth of 91 meters, as opposed to on the initial sketch of 148 meters. So we pulled it back considerably there to clear the crop bunker and still stay sort of a reasonable distance clear of the barn to allow for access and separation, yard requirements, that type of thing.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Otto, any comments or questions?
Yeah, just can we put that sketch back up again, please? So now you are proposing to take the crop bunker and the manure pit away from the severed portion?
Correct.
So the only question we're having is about the barn.
I believe so.
And it is within the 2 hectare size. But that's still too big for the planners. Is that my understanding?
Mr. Gordon?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the lot is still about 5 times the size that we aim for on surplus farm severances.
It's probably less than that, Mr. Gordon.
We aim for 0.4 hectares.
Oh, do you? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So I would say it's still about 5 times what we generally aim for, what the guidelines are. And I would add that the barn is still over the 5% that's allowed under AG zoning. So it's both the scale of the lot, but also the scale of the building. And given the lot is already much larger than is generally supported with surplus farm dwelling severances, when you add on that we're still well above the 5%, I think it's around 10%. It's a much larger building and can be considered accessory with residence to a residence.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Otto, any further?
Just a further question. I do have some concerns about, I do know where this property is. I've seen it over many years. That house used to be a cheese factory, as far as I know. And at some point in time became a residence, and it was added to. And it is sitting right on the road allowance. So there's an encroachment thing, but it's also historically been situated there. So because we have new rules in regards to road widths and things, that's impacting that property. And I thought there were stages within the bylaws that said that you could not actually widen the roads to encroach on the property when it affected the house or other buildings. But that's beside the point. I have a question, a theoretical question. What would happen if a chicken farmer bought this property? He'd want the crop bunker and he'd want the manure pit and he'd want the barn. And he could live in the house and he could bring all his feed in. So it would be still a totally agricultural use. But having said that, I'm in favor of proceeding with the way it is, unless Mr. Shipman and Mr. Gordon can come to an agreement today that they could actually work something out that's better. But I can't see them getting away without that barn being next to the house, because if it was severed off and remained with the property, then the house would be close to the barn. And if someone wanted to reactivate that barn and not use it, they couldn't because it's too close to the house. So I think we have to bite the bullet and let this go the way it's proposed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Otto. Ms. Chandler?
Okay. Forgive my ignorance, but could you tell me what decommissioning involves? We don't see the decommissioning photos unless I just couldn't find them.
Do you have that, Mr. Shipman?
I sent it to staff last week, or perhaps late last week, or yeah, it was late last week. Yeah, so you can see the gutters filled, the stall poles removed. Yeah, it's not going to be used for a dairy operation in the future. That's for sure. That is there's a couple of pictures there showing the extent of the ripping and tearing that's been done in there. There is no intent to use that barn for animals in the future.
So my second question is to planning. You're saying in addition to the zoning bylaw amendment that's required on the larger property, there would be a zoning bylaw amendment required on this new severed parcel because of the lot coverage issue, or is there more to it than that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is correct. The issue is this. It's not. I think we're at the same point, but it's not. To clarify, it's not lot coverage. It's not a percent of the lot that's impermeable that's a concern. It's the size of the accessory structure, or the structure that we don't believe can be accessory to a residence because of the scale of it. It's not appropriate for it's much larger than what can be considered accessory. So it's more akin to a commercial or industrial sized building with a caretaker's residence on the site than it is to a residential site with an accessory building.
So what does that zoning bylaw amendment look like?
I'm sorry, my internet lagged for a moment there.
What does this zoning bylaw amendment look like for this property? I'll tell you, my concern is that this won't be approved as a zoning bylaw amendment. So I'm wondering, like, what specifically is it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's planning's opinion that this would likely be a rezoning, a full rezoning, not just an exception. And we have concerns that we wouldn't be able to support it based on the provincial policy statement and the official plan.
Full rezoning are really expensive. Okay, so my other concern, what if this barn was even further from this property? Like, where's the line that we include these structures on surplus farm dwelling severances? To me, that's kind of a really big part of this, because what if it was, like, how far away is it now? 250 meters maybe? Wild guess. If it was 500 meters away, would we be looking at an even larger severance? This is really, I guess for me, really stretching the envelope on what is acceptable. I don't know if Mr. Shipman or planning has a response to that, but I'm quite uncomfortable with it.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'd suggest that committee has dealt with numerous applications similar to this in the past, maybe not with one building as large as it is, but with multiple farm buildings on a property where you add up the area of the accessory buildings and we're way over the 5%. Traditionally, that's been dealt with in the same rezoning that whereby we rezone the retained farmland is ineligible for residential development. That's how it's been done in the past. Usually it's a case of, as I say, a couple of barns on the property. I can think in my mind of numerous applications I've done personally where we have significantly larger lot area than this, quite often because of a long laneway and a flagpole, and numerous accessory buildings on the severed farm property. And again, it's dealt with under the same rezoning, just adjusting the allowable area of accessory buildings to meet the percentage that we have here. Yeah, that's hopefully that answers your question, at least in part.
I guess part of this is the risk that the owner is taking, that they may not be able to complete the severance because they would not get their zoning bylaw amendment.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. This is the first I'm hearing that planning is the stumbling block of the rezoning. I would be at the committee, the chair's discretion, willing to stand down, go back to my client. He was quite adamant, and then come back and sort of drop one way or the other. Unfortunately, he was supposed to be here at this hearing. However, I just got an email that he had another meeting at 10 o'clock that he had to go to. So he's not available at this hearing, unfortunately.
Okay. So is your proposal to adjourn this application for how many weeks?
I should think at the nearest possible opportunity should be sufficient, Mr. Chair.
That would be March the 2nd or March the 16th. Probably March the 16th will give you a little bit more time to hopefully get a resolution. And I see Mr. Gordon's got his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to correct one thing. We would process both rezonings under the same application as a condition of the severance, despite them being separate conditions in our report. So I just wanted to correct that because Member Chandler had concerns about costs, but it would be the same cost. But we do still have concerns about not being able to support a rezoning of the residential parcel.
Okay. I see that there is a member of the public, Mr. Ivan, who would like to say something.
Oh.
You're muted, Mr. Ivan. There you go.
Hi, Jeff. I just stepped away from my other meeting. I kept this one rolling at the same time, but I think that the situation here is the building is a little further away, but I mean, we've had severances in the past where we had a laneway that was a half a mile long from the road, and we were able to keep the buildings there as well with the house. So I don't see that this is any different situation than what I've had in the past. And as far as going forward, I don't know where we're going to gain anything by going forward. I'm not looking for a rezoning. I'm just looking to have an excess dwelling severed off of the property.
But I think one of the conditions will require that it be rezoned, Mr. I'm not sure what your last name is, sir. Sorry.
Ivan Peterson is my name. Sorry, I'm the owner of the property.
Okay, so I'm not sure that there will be, there is a requirement of this approval of this application that a zoning bylaw amendment be made. So that's not going to change anything. That won't change.
Well,
it'll stick with it.
Yeah. As far as the barn has been decommissioned for sure, 100%. We can do certain things, but I don't think we want to tear a building down that you know, we've spent $2 million to build.
Okay. So, Mr. Shipman, your proposal is to adjourn. Are you still willing to adjourn until March 16th?
Ivan, is that agreeable
That's
to you?
fine, Jeff. Let's and then you and I can touch base and talk a little more about it. That'd be fun, Jeff.
Thank you.
Mr. Lewis, you have a comment?
Yeah, I don't know if adjourning is going to do any good. I think we're going to go around and round. I see the barn there. I don't think it ever will be an agricultural use again, but what a great storage facility. There's lots of uses, and a useful barn can be used in the public's interest and the owner's interest. Right now, I'm willing to support the 91 meters by the 220 if that works, and for the sake of time. I don't know how the rest of the committee feels.
Well, I have a question for Mr. Gordon. What's the risk here? Like, other than just not complying with the bylaw, what's the damage that's going to be done to the neighboring property? What's the risk that we're going to incur here if we approve this application with the barn?
In response, Mr. Chair, I would say the immediate risk would be for the applicant if the rezoning doesn't go through, then this application would lapse. But the overall risk and concern is that a use would be established here in compliance with the bylaw or otherwise, where it would conflict with the agricultural area or be inconsistent with it and negatively impact the continued long-term use of prime agricultural land within Ottawa.
So give me an example of some uses that would be detrimental to the agricultural neighborhood.
Given the size of the building, you could see, and again, this wouldn't comply with the bylaw, but just given that the building exists, someone might move in with an industrial use or a commercial use, and I could start speculating on what could be involved in that, but that would be getting into the realm of speculation. But contaminants and whatnot.
Okay. Chandler, you had your hand up a little while ago. You still?
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear. My concern is that the consent fails based on a condition for the zoning bylaw amendment. I can live with the size of the building. I can live with the size of the lot if there's going to be a way that the zoning will work. My worry is really for the applicant to lose their investment in this consent. And I think, if I always think it's worth giving it a shot to see if there's something that can be resolved beforehand rather than losing the cost of doing the severance because the conditions can't be met. But from my perspective, that risk is up to the applicant and his agent to decide on whether they want to take it, and I will follow accordingly.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Shipman or Mr. Lewis, did you want to say something else? No. Okay. So, Mr. Shipman, so it's there. Are we going to adjourn this application to see if you guys can work things out to the 16th of March, or are we proceeding?
I think being cautious would perhaps we should stand down for a couple of weeks so I can confer with Mr. Peterson. And to be honest with you, this is the first instance where I've seen a surplus farm dwelling or otherwise where we're faced with a scenario that staff and the council may not implement a zoning bylaw pursuant to conditions of a severance approval rendered by this committee. But so we need a little bit of time to consider that. So I think if Ivan's in agreement, we can stand down, but he's the owner. I'll leave it to him.
Mr. Peterson?
I'm in agreement to stand down, Mr. Chair, for a couple of weeks, and Jeff and I can talk to each other in planning and go from there.
I'm proposing March 16th, so that really takes us 4 weeks, if that's okay.
Yes.
All right. So all those in favor of approving the adjournment of this application till March the 16th, please raise your hands. Your applications are approved, adjourned till March the 16th. Thank you. Okay, so now we're on to item number 9, which is having to do with 2170 Ottawa Road 29. Ms. Zander, are you available? Good morning, Ms. Zander.
Good morning again.
Can you take the oath concerning the signposting on the property?
Mr.
Actually, this
Chair,
one I
this is
think
a
we're good.
bring forward. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think you
we're
have
good.
that. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
That's
We're
all
good. So now, can you please describe briefly, keeping in mind we have a 5-minute timeline for presentation of this application?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You may recall we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. My clients and I went back to the drawing board and reduced the size of the proposed severed lot. I think staff are going to share that. The sketch that is in your hearing notice agenda today is not correct, but this does look like it's correct. So we've made the severed lot smaller, just under 4 acres. You'll see the kind of northwest lot line is now outside of the mapped water course, but still captures the well at the south end. And so, yeah, this is the compromise to make the lot smaller and avoid some of the natural heritage features while still really capturing the land that isn't viable agriculture. So we had quite an extensive discussion last time. I don't know if you want me to offer anything else, but we were asked to come back with a smaller lot. So that's what you have for consideration today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are you aware of the 3 conditions should this application be approved today?
Yes, we are. I have no concern with the conditions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gordon, can you make some comments on behalf of the city?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Planning has reviewed the revised sketch. We appreciate that the property lines no longer bisect that water course. That's an improvement and alleviates the major concerns with the previous sketch. We do have minor concerns that the lot line to the rear could have been tightened up a bit more against that accessory structure. But again, those are just minor concerns at this time.
Thank you very much. Does the conservation partners have any comments to make? I don't note any. I think that speaks volumes. So to that end, I'd like to ask the panel for approval of this application. Well, actually, I can ask the panel for their comments. Mr. Lewis?
None support the application.
Thank you. Mr. Otto?
None support the application. Thank you.
Ms. Chandler?
I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask the panel for approval of this application. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Your application is approved, Ms. Zander. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I believe the last item on our list is an application that we have to excuse Mr. Lewis from. Thank you very much for your time today, sir. Now we are dealing with application number 7, only part of it, the part dealing with address 8721 McClinton Road. And Mr. Price, are you around? There you are.
Hi, Mr. Chair. How are you? Members of the
I'm
committee?
fine, thanks. How are you?
Very well. So just to clarify, I believe this is for file number B00014, 12,000 square meters. I think the city addressed it as 8685 McClinton Road. It's the larger of the parcels.
Is that correct, Mr. Gordon?
To you, Mr. Chair, that is correct.
Okay, great. So to that end, Mr. Price, can you just give us a brief description of your application, keeping in mind the 5-minute
Sure,
rule?
yeah. Yeah, did you want me to swear about the signs?
Yep.
Okay.
You solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing, as instructed, and was clearly visible and legible during that time?
I swear,
You swear?
Mr. Chair.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Yes, I swear.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of committee. For the record, Rod Price, Roritar Land Development Consultants, on behalf of the owners of 8725 McClinton. We started out with 2 severance applications on this property, as adjourned earlier in the meeting. There was concerns both with some natural environment systems with the application for B00015, as well as some older dates for some older severances and whether we fit within the window of May 2003 timeline. So that one's on hold. And before you is a severance application for a property, 12,000 plus or minus square meters in area, frontage of 50 meters and a depth of 234. Have reviewed comments provided by staff, and we're in agreement with it all except for condition number 4. As part of any severance application that I am involved with in the rural area, the taking of road widenings is always an issue, and we're quite aware of the city legal department's position in terms of their ability to take these road widening requirements as it relates to the retained portion. Unfortunately, in this particular instance, it is especially egregious, in my opinion, in that you're taking about 650 meters along the McCaffrey Trail, which is a forest road, which has an impact on agricultural viability of the property. Works out to about 2,500 square meters plus or minus of cropland for a portion of the property that is nowhere near where the proposed severance is. But that's more for the record, should we choose to challenge that down the road.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to ask planning to give their comments. Mr. Harrigan.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, the planning department had noted that there was a previous severance on the property that was certified in June 2003. So it was just past the benchmark for the cutoff date for applications and for lot creation. We have addressed this with the applicant, just requesting an adjournment sine die for one of the applications, just until they can confirm when that severance did in fact take place and when it was legally certified. With regard to the application, we do have no concerns with the present one, B00014. It is entirely outside of the natural heritage features there, so we have no concerns with that. In regards to the road widening condition, the planning department's position is exceptionally firm on this matter. That road widening is required for both the severed and retained lot. As City Legal Services have communicated and the department firmly across every application, the development that's taking place is for the whole property right now. It's not just creating one lot, and that's what's being developed. A severance is legally development for the whole lot, the retained and the severed portion. So from that, we do request road widening in accordance with the provincial policy statement and official plan across both the severed and the retained lots, as has been standard practice. If the committee chooses to remove the condition for the retained land, we will have to object to this application. This has been a firm position, something that we will have to pursue further. City Legal Services has been abundantly clear on this, citing past OMB cases as well too, that this is appropriate to take land off of the severed and the retained lot as well too.
Okay, thank you very much. You have any comments, Mr. Otto?
No, I think I'll just remain quiet on this one. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Chandler.
No, I don't have anything to add. It is at the applicant's discretion also to appeal if someone wants to pick up the flag regarding these road widenings. So I'll leave that with them.
Okay. I omitted to ask the Conservation Authority if they have any comments. Conservation partners?
They're not here.
Okay, so they don't have any. Okay, perfect. So to that end, Mr. Price, are you looking to have us remove condition number 4 relating to the road widening for this application? And you'll run the risk then of having it delayed, and the city has been abundantly clear that they will react negatively to this condition being removed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, at this time, we're not asking to remove the condition. We're just, we want to be part of the public record should the applicant choose to appeal it down the road.
Okay.
So it's just part of the record. I just keep the options open for my clients should they choose to be the guinea pig to take on legal services at some point.
Very well. Okay, to that end, then, I'd like to ask the panel if they would approve this application. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Your application is approved, Mr. Price, with all conditions intact. I believe that's
Mr.
the
Chair,
end of our.
members of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Price. Madam Coordinator, that's the end of our day, I believe.
That's it.
Thank you very much, everyone, for your help. Have a great rest of the week. Bye for now.